At the wedding of the year, everything seemed perfect. But then, without warning, a cruel command shattered the atmosphere. The groom's mother, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, pointed at the only black woman in the room and demanded she leave, publicly humiliating her. What no one knew was that this wasn't just any guest. She wasn't some ordinary woman from the crowd. Moments later, a jet with her name on it landed just outside the venue, and it would change everything. Who was this woman? And why did she endure such disgrace? Keep watching to find out what happens when the world realizes they made the biggest mistake of their lives. Her name was Naomi, and before that day, her life seemed like a dream. A successful career in finance, a tight-knit group of friends who adored her, and a relationship with Michael that felt like it had the perfect future. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect, not through arrogance, but through quiet confidence. She had fought hard to get where she was, breaking barriers, proving herself in a world that wasn't always welcoming to women, let alone women of color. When Michael proposed, she felt like all the struggles and late nights had finally paid off. The wedding was going to be a fairy tale, the union of two families from completely different worlds. But Naomi knew that marrying into Michael's wealthy family meant stepping into a world that was unfamiliar, where things weren't always as they seemed. The polished smiles, the glances exchanged over dinner tables. It was all so new to her, but she was determined to make it work. Still, deep inside, she had that gnawing feeling. Something didn't feel right. And when she stepped into that grand hall, surrounded by opulence, Naomi couldn't shake the sense that the perfect day was about to be marred by something she wasn't prepared for. Little did she know, the moment she stepped into the spotlight, her life was about to change forever. As Naomi entered the grand ballroom, her heart skipped a beat. The chandeliers hung like giants overhead, casting soft light over the sea of perfectly dressed guests. Michael's family, known for their wealth and social prominence, were all smiles, faux warmth that didn't quite reach their eyes. Naomi forced a smile, telling herself to enjoy the moment. But something was off. It was the way the women looked at her. The whispering behind hands, the sudden silences when she approached. Naomi had always been aware of her differences in spaces, like these, but today she tried to ignore it. After all, Michael had reassured her that his family would accept her. The evening started like any other wedding, elegant, slow-paced, filled with laughter and cheers as the couple took their vows. Naomi's eyes drifted over to Michael, his face glowing as he kissed her. For a moment, everything felt right. The air seemed to carry hope, warmth, and excitement. But that peace was shattered in an instant. During dinner, Naomi was introduced to Michael's mother, Mrs. Harrington. She was a woman of sharp features and even sharper eyes, a look that seemed to dissect Naomi from every angle. The conversation started innocently enough, with Mrs. Harrington offering compliments about Naomi's dress. Naomi tried to smile through it, aware that she was the only black woman in the room, but determined to keep the peace. Then, without warning, it came. Mrs. Harrington's smile turned cold and she tilted her head. "I'm sorry, Naomi, but I think you need to leave," she said, her words dripping with venom, though they were laced in politeness. Naomi's breath caught in her chest. "You see," she continued, "this is a very exclusive event, and I don't think your presence is quite appropriate." The entire table fell silent. Naomi felt every eye on her as if she had just been struck. Her body froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. Did she hear that right? Was this some kind of cruel joke? The room seemed to tilt, and the laughter and chatter from a moment ago turned into an oppressive silence. Naomi looked to Michael, his face pale, his hands trembling at his sides. He didn't move, didn't say a word. Her stomach dropped. I don't understand," Naomi stammered, forcing her voice to remain steady. What do you mean? I'm... You are a distraction, Mrs. Harrington interrupted, her voice cold, casual. I think it's best if you go now. Naomi couldn't breathe. She stood up, heart pounding, every muscle in her body screaming to run. Her eyes stung, and a lump formed in her throat. This wasn't happening, was it? The room felt suffocating. Naomi's vision blurred, and she turned, quickly walking out of the ballroom, her heels clicking against the marble floor. But no one followed. No one tried to stop her. Out in the quiet hallway, Naomi collapsed against the wall, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and completely humiliated. The weight of the words, the coldness of the rejection, hit her all at once. She had faced racism before, but this was different. This was personal. As she wiped away a tear, she glanced outside the large windows. The night sky stretched endlessly, and for a brief moment Naomi felt an urge to flee, to leave it all behind. But then something caught her eye. A jet, sleek and powerful, descended toward the open field outside the estate. Naomi's pulse quickened, and for a fleeting second, she wondered who in the world could possibly have arrived in a private jet at this wedding. But as the jet's engine screamed to a halt, Naomi's heart sank. That jet had her name written all over it. What was going on? How had this all escalated so quickly? Naomi stood there, frozen, as the sound of the jet's engines roared in her ears. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had spent the last few years fighting for a seat at the table, proving herself in a world that constantly tried to remind her she didn't belong. But now, here she was, humiliated, rejected, dismissed by the very people she had tried so hard to impress. Her hand trembled as she reached into her bag, her fingers brushing against the business card she had just received from the pilot. She couldn't let this moment define her. She had spent her entire life building something meaningful, something monumental, and no one, no matter how powerful, could take that away from her. With a deep breath, Naomi walked out of the house, the cold air biting at her skin. She wasn't going to let this injustice be the last word. She wasn't going to let them win. She stepped toward the jet, her heels clicking against the concrete with purpose, as if the world were watching. But there was something more important than the crowd that had just rejected her. This moment wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming herself. As the jet's door opened, Naomi stepped inside, her heart racing with the weight of the decision she had just made. The pilot nodded respectfully, almost as if he knew exactly who she was. Naomi glanced at the interior of the jet, sleek and luxurious, but none of that mattered anymore. She wasn't running away. She was stepping into a new world, one where her voice couldn't be silenced. With the door closing behind her, Naomi took a seat, her gaze steady and resolute. This was her moment. She wasn't just going to leave that wedding behind. She was going to take control of her own narrative, and as the jet began its ascent into the night sky, Naomi made a vow to herself. This was only the beginning. As the jet soared through the night sky, Naomi sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the city lights below, each one flickering like a distant promise. The pain from the rejection still stung, but there was a fire inside her now, something more powerful than the humiliation. She wasn't just running away from the hate. She was running toward something bigger. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. She knew that. But Naomi had learned something vital that night. Her worth wasn't defined by others' perceptions. It wasn't about fitting into their narrow, suffocating world of privilege. It was about creating her own. The rejection wasn't just a personal attack. It was a reminder of how deep racial prejudice runs, how much work still needs to be done to break down these walls. But Naomi refused to let that be her story. As the jet flew further from the wedding, further from the people who tried to diminish her, Naomi felt a sense of empowerment she'd never known before. She wasn't just a black woman in a room full of judgment. She was someone capable of reshaping the very narrative that sought to hold her back, and with that a spark of defiance ignited within her. She would use her platform, her voice, her influence to tear down the systems that allowed such discrimination to thrive. This wasn't just her fight, it was everyone's fight, and so Naomi made a promise, not to herself, but to the generations that came after her. To the women who would face similar hatred, to the men who would be silenced by their skin color, to every soul who was made to feel less than. Her journey had just begun. What if we all had the courage to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for the world we want to see, a world where no one ever feels the sting of racism again? Will you join the fight?